Write this down, Julian. I may be 72, but I still know how to draw a line, and once I draw it, I don't build over it. Morning marine layer lay like lace over the vines when I pulled into the gravel drive. The house Sadie and I designed, redwood ribs, glass lungs inhaling the valley, caught the soft light. She wanted it to feel like a chapel for ordinary days. I still tap the doorframe like I'm entering church. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I heard voices where only wind and starlings should be. Out among row 7, Cabernet we grafted the year Sadie beat pneumonia. Stood my son with a tablet. Julian wore that realtor smile he saves for other people's dreams. Beside him, Kaylee in gym slick athleisure and Finn, her brother, scanning pins on a LiDAR screen like he already owned the contours. This land is worth millions. Julian said without hello, Dad, we could do cluster housing around the crest. Walkability. A wine-themed community center. You don't have to fight the slope anymore. I never fought it, I said. I listened. Kaylee smiled like a realtor brochure. It's about legacy. Imagine a plaque with your name on it. My name is already on every post in this soil. I touched the stake. Sadie carved the first set by hand, back before we could afford a label printer. Avery and Riley learned to walk between these rows. Finn lifted the tablet, zooming. Setbacks, water rights, totally doable. Entitlements will fly if we start now. Julian stepped closer, voice lowering as if this were a kindness. You're not managing it, Dad. You forget deliveries, your back's bad, you won't hire help. It's time. We'll do the heavy lifting. You rest. I didn't yield. Architects learn to hold silence the way masons hold plumb. Steady until gravity admits you're right. He blinked first, then tried the friendlier blade. Look, for convenience, so I can run errands, talk to inspectors, sign these. He pulled papers from a leather folder, the same brass corner kind I gave him when he turned 21. Power of attorney language, just temporary. The county loves when there's one point person. We'll be a team. Kaylee angled, so I saw only a clean summary page. Finn shifted to block the sun. I caught the smell of eucalyptus and printer toner. My hands are steady from years of drawing joists and trusses. Still, I didn't take the pen. Not yet. I thought of Sadie's laugh echoing in the crush pad, of nights we slept on blankets upstairs when the framing was raw and winter crawled through. We built this place like a ship, one plank at a time, and then we learned to sail it. Julian softened his tone. Dad, you taught me contracts. We'll keep you looped on everything. You mean you'll keep me looped out? I said, Now it's ours, he blurted, and the sentence fell between us like a dropped bottle. Intact until it wasn't. Kaylee winced. Finn pretended to read. I felt the shift then, like when a structure settles and a hairline crack appears at the corner of a window. It doesn't scream. It whispers. Pay attention or this house will teach you humility. Bring them inside, I said. If we do anything, we do it at the table. At the big oak slab Sadie and I salvaged from a storm-felled tree, I put on my reading glasses. They've seen blueprints, birth certificates, hospice forms. They've never seen me scared. I wasn't scared now. I was measuring. Legal boilerplate. Notations. My name spelled right. Temporary authorization. Highlighted. A blank line where date should sit like guardrails. I looked at Julian. He looked back with the confidence of a man who thinks the bluff already worked. There's missing parts, I said. It's standard, he said. I'll fill them after we file. Faster that way. Faster is how you ruin wine in houses. Still, I remember the delivery I botched, the barrelhead I'd lifted wrong, the doctor's warning about my spine. Pride can be a staircase without a landing. Fine, I said. Team. I signed the first page, then the second. Ink sank into the paper, like rain into dry loam. My hand paused over the third signature. I pictured Avery and Riley chasing each other around the olive tree, Sadie's braid falling over her shoulder as she tied canes. I told myself I was buying time. I told myself I was father first, builder second. Julian slid the folder shut with a soft clap. You won't regret this. The eucalyptus wind rose, rattling the house's cedar siding like a warning. Somewhere a hawk cried, a clean line drawn across a blank sky. I thought I heard Sadie say my name, the way she did when a beam needed an extra brace. Dad. Julian was already at the door. Phone out, text firing. I'll get the inspectors moving. I watched him cross the threshold of the place he didn't understand. The oak table held the imprint of my blueprint knife. The pen left a faint groove I could see even with the paper gone. Only then did the words form. In the language of trouble I should have recognized a second, he smiled. Signature in the trap. Money is a louder weapon than any gun. And today I found myself unarmed. The morning after signing those papers, I drove into town for supplies. Fertilizer, a few spare hinges for the barn doors, a bottle of olive oil from Marta's Market. The clerk swiped my card, frowned, and tried again. The machine spat out the same flat denial. She handed it back like a dead bird. Maybe try the bank, she said gently, as if I forgotten my PIN code. Inside the bank, the smell of floor wax and artificial lavender greeted me, sterile as an operating room. I'd built vaulted ceilings that sang with light, but this place compressed air into rectangles. At the counter, a young man in a navy tie clicked his keyboard with practiced sympathy. Mr. Hunter, your accounts are temporarily restricted. He avoided my eyes. We received a notice filed under capacity review. It states you may not be in full possession of your faculties. Capacity review? I repeated. My voice carried farther than I intended, echoing off glass partitions. Customers turned. A mother with a stroller wheeled away. The clerk swallowed. It came with your son's signature. Until it's resolved, you can't withdraw funds. I leaned on the counter, the wood too polished to hold my grip. Young man, I designed buildings that survived earthquakes. I rebuilt these hands after scaffolding collapsed on me in '79. Do I look incapable? He whispered, I'm just following protocol. Back in the parking lot, the asphalt radiated heat, though the sun was barely up. My card sat useless in my palm, plastic that once unlocked groceries, tractor parts, hospital bills for Sadie. Now it mocked me, silent as a dead phone. The card is silent. I sat behind the wheel of my truck, staring at the vineyard on the horizon, vines stretching like green ribs against the hills. Without money, I couldn't pay for irrigation repairs. Without irrigation, the grapes would wither. Julian knew exactly where to cut the artery. At home, I walked through the cellar. The air was cool, stone walls holding decades of harvests. Each bottle carried a year etched in dust. I opened one from '93, the year Avery was born. I poured a glass, but the taste was bitter and metallic. My hands trembled, not from age but from fury. Julian had turned banks into accomplices. He'd turned signatures into shackles. Sadie used to say, Hunter, you build bridges where other men build walls. But now my own son had bricked me inside my life. The phone rang. I answered with a grit still in my throat. Dad. Julian's voice. Smooth, professional. I heard you had some trouble at the bank. Don't worry. Kaylee and I can cover expenses until you're officially cleared. We'll handle things in the meantime. In the meantime, I said slowly, you mean you'll strip the vineyard down to studs? Silence. Then his realtor laughed, hollow as an empty wine glass. Relax, Dad. Think of this as retirement. He hung up. I stood in the kitchen, the same place Sadie taught me how to braise lamb, where Avery and Riley once fought over spoonfuls of jam. The room hummed with the absence of family. I opened the drawer where Sadie kept her stationery, yellowed envelopes bound by twine. Her handwriting lingered on a corner of a grocery list. Flour, time, patience. I pressed the paper flat with my thumb. Somewhere in those envelopes, I felt her waiting to remind me what strength really looked like. That night, I couldn't sleep. I listened to the creak of rafters and the rustle of wind through shutters, each sound like a question I wasn't ready to answer. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of vines snapping, their roots clawing at dry soil, and Julian's voice saying, now it's ours. I woke with sweat damp on my shirt and a single thought anchoring me. They'd stolen my money, but not my ground. At dawn, boots laced, I stepped into the vineyard. The dew clung to leaves like 100 tiny mirrors. And on the horizon, just beyond the mist, I saw 3 white SUVs nosing down the dirt road, strangers climbing out with clipboards, measuring wheels, and reflective vests. They were here already, and I knew exactly what came next. The appraisal of the estate. They came with clipboards like priests with Bibles, ready to read my land its last rites. 3 men and a woman, in neon vests, fanned out across the property. One dragged a measuring wheel along the gravel drive. Another aimed a laser device at the slope of the hillside. The woman dictated notes into a recorder, her tone clinical, like she was describing a cadaver. Julian trailed behind them, all charm and authority. He shook their hands, pointed out easements, spoke of parcel value and potential mixed-use development. He didn't see the vineyard. He saw square footage with price tags. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, boots heavy with dust. This was the same porch where Sadie used to set out pitchers of lemonade for workers. Today I felt like a man defending a fortress with nothing but memory for armor. One of the surveyors gestured at me. "Owner?" he asked Julian. Julian hesitated only half a second, then said, "Representative." He flashed a smile. The word lodged in me like a nail. Representative of what? Greed? Betrayal? I walked down the steps and planted myself between the vines and their instruments. Before you cut this land into lots, remember each stake holds 30 years of roots. You can't measure that with a wheel. The woman looked uncomfortable. "We're just doing our job, sir." "No," I said, "you're doing his job." I nodded at Julian. He pulled me aside, lowering his voice. "Dad, please don't make this difficult. These are professionals. We can't afford delays." "Delays?" I barked a laugh. "Julian, this isn't a condo project. This is the house your mother died in. The vineyard she walked every morning before the sun burned off the fog." His jaw tightened. "You're clinging to ghosts. Legacy is what we build next, not what we bury ourselves in." The workers kept moving. The laser flickered across the barn door, catching the carved initials H+S that Sadie and I etched into the wood the day we finished construction. The red beam cut straight through it, like an executioner's sword. Something inside me buckled. For years I believed patience was strength, that silence could outlast noise. But now I saw the truth. Silence was surrender, and Julian was counting on it. I left them to their measurements and went back inside. The oak table still held the echo of my signature. The papers were gone, but the betrayal remained. My hands shook, not with weakness, but with an architect's fury, the knowledge that a single false line can bring down an entire structure. That night, searching through Sadie's old drawers for strength, I found more than I expected. A yellow envelope, sealed, her handwriting unmistakable. My name on the front, the curve of her letters soft as her voice once was. I opened it carefully, afraid the paper itself might crumble like ash. Inside, a single page. "Hunter, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, but the vineyard isn't. Don't let Julian destroy what we built. Your spine is still straight. Use it." Her words reached across time and grief, sharper than any blade. I pressed the page to my chest. For the first time since she passed, I felt her standing beside me, steadying my hands. I lit the fireplace, though the night was warm, just to see the flames. Sadie always said fire was the heart of a house. As the embers cracked, I swore aloud, "They won't erase us. I'll make sure the world sees who they really are." The next morning, as mist clung to vines, I called Leo, my former apprentice, now an engineer with toys that would make any spy jealous. If Julian wanted war with paper and lies, I'd fight back with proof. "Leo," I said when he answered, "I need eyes everywhere. Discreet, quiet, but sharp." He didn't hesitate. "Say no more. I'll bring the gear tonight." I hung up, the letter still in my pocket. For the first time in weeks, I felt my spine straighten, just as Sadie commanded. The estate had been appraised. The vultures had circled. But the next move would be mine, and it would begin with the hidden cameras. They thought I was deaf to their whispers. But walls remember, and vines carry secrets better than blood. Leo arrived after dark, headlights off as he eased his truck down the dirt road. He was taller than I remembered, with shoulders that had grown into his frame since the days he shadowed me on construction sites. He carried 2 hard cases, the kind that looked military, not civilian. "You sure you want to go this far, old man?" he asked, though there was respect in his grin. "Julian is already dismantling my life with pens and lawyers. If I don't see what he's planning, I'm fighting blind." We set to work beneath the cover of the vineyard. Between the rows of Cabernet and Zinfandel, Leo placed motion-activated cameras the size of walnuts. He tucked them into birdhouses, screwed them into beams above the crush pad, hid one behind the antique clock in the tasting room. Their lenses glinted once under moonlight, then vanished. "Infrared, high-res, and synced to my laptop," Leo explained. "You'll hear what they say before they know they've said it." When he left, I walked the rows alone. Sadie's letter burned like a coal in my pocket. Every creak of the trellis, every rustle of the wind through leaves, felt like her urging me forward. The next afternoon, Julian returned with Finn. They didn't bother knocking. Through the feed on my old tablet, I watched them sit at the oak table where generations of family had eaten, their voices sharper than the wine glasses they never touched. Kaylee joined them, her heels tapping like nails across the floor. "The appraisal is solid," she said. "By fall we could have permits. Buyers are lining up. All we need is to keep the old man compliant until then." Julian exhaled, impatient. "Compliant? He's a liability. Dad will drag his feet until harvest rots. We can't afford another delay." Finn leaned forward, his tone harder than Julian's. "Then we push him out. Legally, socially, whatever it takes. By autumn, he's gone." The words sank into me like frost into roots. My own son, plotting eviction while sipping coffee in the house I built. Then Julian added, almost whispering, "We'll call the agencies. Get him declared incompetent. By the time he realizes, it'll be too late." I gripped the tablet, so tight my knuckles went white. My chest heaved, but not with fear, with the clarity of knowing my enemy. That night, I played the recording again, this time to the old stereo in the cellar. Sadie's face stared at me from a framed photo on the wall, her eyes as steady as ever. "You were right," I told her. "They don't just want the land. They want me erased." The following week, the prophecy became flesh. A knock rattled the front door. 2 figures in government windbreakers stood beneath the porch light, clipboards in hand. Their smiles were rehearsed, bureaucratic. "Mr. Hunter?" one asked. "We're here to conduct an evaluation of your living situation. Standard protocol. Please understand, it's about your safety." I glanced past them at the vineyard, glowing gold under the setting sun. Rose, Sadie, and I planted by hand. This wasn't about safety. It was about theft wrapped in paperwork. They stepped inside without waiting for my answer, and I realized my fight had just moved into a new arena, the social services. They came with smiles sharp as scalpels, ready to cut me out of my own home. The 2 officials moved through the rooms like appraisers of human worth, clipboards in hand. They noted the worn rug in the foyer, the stack of unopened mail, the half-finished sketches on my drafting table. One of them, a woman in a gray suit, pointed at the wine bottles on the counter. "Do you often drink alone, Mr. Hunter?" I bristled. "Do you often insult your hosts?" Her partner, a man with square glasses, scribbled without looking at me. "We're just establishing a baseline. Family members have expressed concern about your ability to manage the estate." Family members. Julian's fingerprints smudged every word. They asked about my back pain, my daily schedule, whether I remembered what day it was. I answered with the patience of a man who's argued with stubborn beams and crooked contractors his whole life. But inside, my pulse hammered. I could see the trap being built, brick by brick. When they left, promising to compile findings, I locked the door behind them and leaned against the wood. My house had never felt so hollow. That night, I sat with the recordings Leo's cameras had captured. Julian's voice filled the cellar again, smug and venomous. "By fall, we'll have him out. This is our chance." Kaylee laughed softly. "No one fights City Hall, Hunter least of all." Finn's reply was darker. "If he resists, there are other ways. Accidents happen." The words twisted my gut, but also lit something in me, Something I thought had died with Sadie. Rage, yes, but also resolve. I sent Leo the files. Make a copy, I told him. Someday soon, the world will need to hear this. Understood, he said. The next morning, I woke before dawn and walked the rows. Dew clung to the vines, reflecting light like tiny mirrors. Sadie used to say the vineyard was alive, that it breathed with us. I whispered to the leaves, they want to bury me, but you and I, we've weathered worse. By midday, the news vans were parked on the county courthouse steps. Someone, maybe Leo, maybe fate, had leaked the recordings. Local channels ran the headline. Son realtor plots to oust father for vineyard fortune. The story spread like fire through dry brush. Neighbors called. Friends from the old architecture firm emailed. Even Marta from the market stopped by with stew and tears in her eyes. We're with you, Hunter, she said. I sat at the oak table, watching the screen as Julian's polished face flashed beside captions of betrayal. Every anchor's voice carried the same condemnation: greed, manipulation, cruelty. My son, stripped bare for the valley to see. I thought of Sadie again, her laughter, her fierce love. She always believed truth would outlive lies. Maybe she was right, but as the sun set, painting the sky the color ripe Merlot, I knew the story wasn't over. Public shame was only the first stone in this wall of justice I was building. And the next stone had to be stronger. It had to be unbreakable. Because tomorrow, I would set in motion the one move Julian could never undo: the trust. They thought they could cut me out of my own bloodline. Instead, I carved them out of the future. The morning after the news broke, the valley buzzed like a beehive someone had kicked. Neighbors waved from their trucks, honked in solidarity, even left bottles of their own wine on my porch like offerings to a stubborn saint. But victory, I knew, is fragile. Julian wasn't finished, and neither was I. At dawn, I met with Margaret Shaw, my lawyer of 30 years. She was sharp as the day I first hired her. Silver hair pulled tight, glasses perched low, voice I could sand steel smooth. We sat in her office surrounded by blueprints and estate maps, and I laid out Sadie's letter. Margaret, I said, Julian's already poisoned the banks, the inspectors, even social services. I need a wall he can't climb. Her eyes flicked over the paper, then back to me. You're talking about a trust. Not for him, I said. For Avery and Riley. When they're grown, 25 years old enough to know what it costs us to build this place, old enough now to squander it. Margaret leaned back, a faint smile tugging her lips. That would mean your son and his wife get nothing. Exactly, I said. They gamble the family's soul for a quick sale. They lose. My grandchildren win. We drafted it together, her pen scratching like a chisel on stone. Line by line, the vineyard shifted from vulnerable soil to fortress. The land, the house, the cellar, all bound by my signature to a future Julian couldn't touch. When the documents were complete, I pressed my name onto the page with a hand steady, as when I first drew Sadie's dream house on paper. Ink met fiber, and something in me unclenched. Congratulations, Margaret said. You've just locked the gate. By the time I drove home, word of the trust had spread. Kaylee called, her voice dripping with rehearsed sweetness. Hunter, darling, we just heard. This isn't fair. You can't punish Julian like this. He's your son. He was my son, I said quietly and hung up. Later, through Leo's cameras, I watched their kitchen unravel. Julian slammed his fist on the counter, veins rising in his neck. Kaylee hurled a glass into the sink. Finn cursed under his breath. He gave it to the kids? Julian spat. The kids? What are we supposed to do now? Kaylee's silence said everything. The gold had turned to ash. That night, I walked the rows with a lantern, light bobbing across leaves heavy with promise. For the first time in weeks, I felt air in my lungs, the kind of breath Sadie used to take after a harvest, when we collapsed in the grass with purple stains on our hands. I whispered into the night, It's safe now, love. For them. For us. But as if the vines themselves wanted to remind me the fight wasn't finished, the wind shifted. Smoke, faint, acrid, threaded the air. My lantern caught a flicker at the far edge of the vineyard. flames licking the dry grass. The trust might have saved the state on paper, but in the real world, fire was already at my door, and the cameras would soon reveal the arsonist. The arson. Fire is a thief that doesn't wait for permission. It takes everything in silence, then leaves you with nothing but smoke. I ran to the rows, lantern swinging wild, boots crushing dry soil. The flames crackled low at first, dancing along the outer vines, but the wind turned, and in seconds it was a predator racing toward the heart of the vineyard. Neighbors saw the glow and came with hoses, buckets, anything that could carry water. We fought side by side, mud streaked on our arms, smoke clawing our throats. By dawn, the fire was out, but the damage was carved into the land. Charred stumps stood like blackened teeth. I knelt in the ash, fingers sinking into soil that smelled of ruin. Leo arrived, his laptop under one arm, face grim. "Hunter," he said, "you need to see this." In the cellar, he pulled up the footage from the hidden cameras. Grainy infrared images played across the screen. A figure slipping through the rows with a canister. The strike of a match. Flames bursting alive. It wasn't Julian. It was Finn. I stared at the screen, the truth burning hotter than the fire itself. Julian's brother-in-law, the man who called me obsolete, who smirked while measuring the house for demolition. His hand was steady as he set my life ablaze. "Do we take this to sheriff?" Leo asked. I thought of Julian's face on the news, the headlines branding him a traitor. And now this, his ally caught red-handed. "No," I said, "not yet." Instead, I called a journalist from the local paper. By evening, the story ran across every feed. Family vineyard sabotage, brother-in-law caught on camera. The video spread faster than the fire itself. Neighbors shook their heads. Customers canceled listings with Julian's firm. Kaylee's yoga studio lost sponsors overnight. My enemies had wanted to brand me incompetent. Instead, they branded themselves criminals. That night, I stood at the edge of the vineyard, the sky black with lingering smoke. I thought of Sadie again, her belief that truth outlasts lies. "We're winning, love," I whispered. But victory carries its own danger. For men like Julian, desperation is gasoline. And the next morning, I found him on my porch, suit wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. "You think you've won?" he said, voice breaking. "You've humiliated me. You've destroyed Kaylee's reputation. You've left me nothing." "You did that yourself," I said. He shoved a stack of papers into my chest. "Court order. The vineyard is under review for sale. You're done, old man." I flipped through the pages, recognizing forged seals, signatures that didn't match. Julian's lies printed in black ink. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Margaret, my lawyer, had already taught me how to read between false lines. I looked up from the forged documents, my heart steady as stone. The next battle would not be fought with flames or fists, but with law and proof, and it would be revealed in the fake sale. They thought paper could finish what fire failed to destroy. But a lie, no matter how official it looks, always burns the edges. I spread the documents across the oak table, the same slab of wood where Sadie and I once pressed grapes with our bare hands, laughing until midnight. Now it was the battlefield for Julian's latest scheme, the fake sale. Each page carried the pomp of legality. County seals, notary stamps, signatures of judges I knew by name. To an untrained eye, it was flawless. But architects live in details. We see when a window frame is a 1/4 inch too wide, when a foundation line drifts by a degree. And here, I saw sloppiness disguised as confidence. The notary's signature curved the wrong way. The county emblem was pixelated, as if cut from a scanned copy. And the judge's name, they had spelled it wrong. I picked up the phone and called Margaret. She arrived that afternoon, storm gray suit crisp, eyes sharper than any blade. She scanned the documents once, twice, then snorted. "This isn't just sloppy. It's criminal. Whoever forged these doesn't know the law. They only know ambition." "Julian brought them himself," I said. Margaret's jaw clenched. "Then he's complicit. We'll take this to court. And when we do, we won't just protect your land. We'll destroy his credibility for good." That night, Leo projected the camera recordings onto my cellar wall. The same videos of Finn with the gas can, Julian whispering threats at the oak table, Kaylee bragging about buyers. Watching them loom across stone was like seeing ghosts forced into confession. "Show me where to send them," Leo said. "Not yet," I replied. "First, the court." 2 weeks later, we stood before a judge in a chamber that smelled faintly of cedar and ink. Julian, polishing his suit. Kaylee at his side with practiced tears. Finn lurking behind like a shadow. They looked less like a family and more like a cornered pack. Margaret spoke first. She laid out the inconsistencies, her voice steady as a gavel. She placed the forged documents under the judge's nose, then presented authenticated copies for comparison. Every discrepancy was a nail in Julian's coffin. Julian tried to interject, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. "Mr. Hunter's signature may have been obtained under questionable circumstances," the judge said, "but these filings are outright forgeries. This court does not tolerate fraud." The gavel struck once. Echoes filled the chamber like thunder. Julian's face drained of color. Kaylee's hand slipped from his arm. Finn looked at the floor. Outside, reporters swarmed, microphones thrust forward. "Mr. Hunter, how do you respond to your son's attempt to defraud you?" I spoke clearly, my voice carrying over chaos. "This vineyard is more than land. It's memory, sweat, and love. You can't fake those things, not with signatures, not with stamps. And anyone who tries deserves the truth laid bare." The clip aired that night on every local channel. For the second time, Julian was humiliated in public. This time by the very system he thought he controlled. But victory is never final when greed still breeds. That evening, as I walked the charred rows where vines struggled to sprout green again, a new sound shattered the quiet. Glass breaking, boots against wood. From the house, alarm shrieked. Lights flared. Shadows darted past windows. This wasn't paperwork. This wasn't fire. It was a home invasion. The vineyard had withstood flames, and the courts had withstood lies. But now, the battle had broken through my very walls, and I would meet it head-on in the break-in at night. They came in masks, but masks don't hide desperation. Desperation has its own smell, like sweat and fear and gasoline. The alarm wailed through the house, a shrill cry that split the vineyard night. Lights blazed from the eaves as the security system Leo and I had wired together roared awake. Sirens shrieked. Flood lamps turned the vineyard into a white battlefield. Through the window, I saw 3 figures in dark hoodies smash across the porch. One kicked the door, another carried a crowbar. They moved with the jittery rhythm of amateurs, not professionals. Amateurs are dangerous. They don't calculate, they just break. I hit the hidden switch Leo had installed under the oak table. The house groaned alive, shutters slamming, locks snapping tight, spotlights swiveling like search beams. From the barn, an old air raid siren screamed into the valley, a relic of Cold War drills I'd salvaged years ago. The intruders froze. One shouted, "What the hell is this?" Another raised a crowbar to glass, but was blinded as a floodlight slammed into his eyes. Then the vineyard roared with reinforcements. My neighbor, Carlos, retired engineer, stubborn as iron, came running with a shotgun cradled in his arms. "Hunter," he barked. "Inside." But I wasn't leaving. This was my house, my walls, my fight. I stepped onto the porch with nothing but my cane, held firm like a staff. "This land isn't yours," I shouted into blinding light. "Not now, not ever." The intruders hesitated. Behind me, the sirens blared. Neighbors' headlights appeared at the edge of the road. Dogs barked. The valley was awake. One masked figure cursed, then bolted into the vineyard. Another stumbled after him. The third threw down the crowbar and vanished into the night. Silence fell, broken only by the dying wail of alarms. Smoke drifted from a broken lantern they'd dropped. My hands shook, not from fear, but from fury at how close they'd come to stepping across the last line. Carlos patted my shoulder. "They won't try again. Not here." But I knew better. Julian's desperation had teeth. If fire didn't break me, if forged papers didn't, he would keep clawing, and each claw mark left him more alone. The next day, I watched through Leo's cameras as Kaylee and Finn confronted him, their voices carried sharp in the kitchen. "You've ruined us," Kaylee hissed. "My studio's gone, our friends don't answer. Finn can't walk the streets without whispers. And now, breaking into your father's house? Are you insane?" Julian slammed the counter with his palm. "It wasn't me." Finn shot back. "It was your idea." The silence that followed was a chasm too wide to bridge. Kaylee grabbed her bag and stormed out. Finn followed. For the first time, Julian didn't chase them. Through the camera's lens, I saw him sink into a chair alone, his head in his hands. The man who tried to take everything from me now sat with nothing. But I wasn't ready to end this war. Not yet. If Sadie's vineyard had taught me anything, it was patience. Vines take years before they yield true fruit. Revenge, too, has a season. And my season was coming, with an invitation no son could refuse. The reconciliation dinner. They say reconciliation tastes like bread and wine. But I was setting a table for war. The dining room hadn't seen a family meal in years. Dust had gathered in the corners, and the oak table, once covered with Sadie's roasts, her pies, her laughter, sat like a monument to silence. That night, I polished it until it would shone again, lit candles in brass holders we bought at a flea market in Napa, and uncorked a bottle from the last vintage Sadie touched with her hands. Then I called Julian. His voice was wary, rough at the edges. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you're still my son," I said, "and because this fight ends one way or another. Come, bring Kaylee." There was a pause and the faintest sigh. "Fine. Tonight." I set the table for 3. Forks aligned, glasses gleaming, plates that hadn't seen food since Sadie's funeral. But my real preparation waited beneath the surface. Leo had wired the house to the teeth. Cameras pointed at the dining room. A hidden projector hummed in the cellar, waiting for its cue. When Julian and Kaylee arrived, they looked worn, frayed at the seams. Kaylee's once perfect hair was pulled back without care. Julian's suit hung on him like borrowed skin. They entered cautiously, as if suspecting poison in the air. "You look tired," I said. Julian gave a hollow laugh. Public humiliation does that. We sat. For a while, silence reigned, broken only by the scrape of knives and forks. I told him about the harvest, how the fire hadn't killed every vine, how new shoots were pushing through the ash. They listened but didn't reply. Finally, Julian put down his fork. "Why invite us here? To gloat? To watch us squirm?" "No," I said, "to remind you of what you've already lost." I reached beneath the table and slid a bottle forward. A deep red, label faded with time. Sadie's last vintage. She wanted it saved for a moment worth remembering. Julian eyed it suspiciously. "And this is that moment." "Exactly," I said, pulling the cork. I poured 3 glasses, the aroma rich and alive, filling the room like memory itself. We raised our glasses. Kaylee sipped first, her lips pressing into a tight line. "It's good," she admitted, though her eyes were tired. Julian swirled his glass, but didn't drink. "What's the catch, Dad?" I smiled thinly. "There's always a catch, isn't there?" I tapped the side of the bottle. From its base, hidden in the glass, a small metallic glint caught the candlelight. A QR code Leo had etched and sealed. Kaylee frowned. "What's that?" "Proof," I said. At my signal, Leo, watching from the cellar, activated the projector. The far wall flickered alive, flooding the room with light. First came Finn's face, pale and guilty, pouring gasoline onto my vines. Then Kaylee's voice on camera, laughing about buyers lining up. Then Julian himself, spitting words like knives. By fall, we'll have him out. This is our chance. The room froze. The firelight trembled on their faces. Kaylee pushed her chair back, eyes wide with betrayal. "You recorded us," she whispered. "I listened," I said. "The vines listened. And now the world will listen, too." Julian lunged a projector, but Kaylee stopped him with a single movement, her hand dropping her napkin like it was the last tie she'd ever lay on that table. "I'm done," she said, rising. Her heels clicked toward the door, sharp and final. She didn't look back. Finn didn't show that night. He'd already vanished. And Julian, my son, my betrayer, stood alone, drenched in the glow of his own words. But the reckoning wasn't complete yet, because humiliation is one thing, collapse is another, and collapse was coming with the breakdown of Julian. They say a man doesn't break all at once, but I watched my son shatter like glass, one crack, then another, until nothing held him together. After the dinner, silence clung to the house like smoke. The projector's ghost still lingered on the wall. Faint light where Julian's face had twisted in rage. Kaylee's footsteps echoed in my memory, each heel strike a nail in the coffin of their marriage. Finn had already vanished, swallowed by guilt and cowardice. And Julian had nothing left but the ruins of his ambition. For days, he didn't call. The vineyard slept under a thin veil of fog. Workers came and went without mentioning him, and I let myself believe it might finally be over. But greed doesn't surrender. It mutates. One night, unable to sleep, I poured myself a glass from the same bottle Sadie had saved, the vintage that had carried my trap. I sat by the window and saw headlights sweep across the vineyard road. A car door slammed. Then the sound of something breaking inside my son's house echoed faintly through the valley air. I didn't go that night. Some battles you let a man fight with his own demons. But the next day, word traveled faster than wildfire. Neighbors whispered of Julian screaming alone in his kitchen, throwing plates against the wall, glass shattering like gunfire. Someone claimed they heard him yelling at shadows, cursing Finn's name, begging Kaylee to come back. Others said they saw him stumble onto the porch and collapse, sobbing into his own hands. Through Leo's cameras, I finally saw it myself. Julian pacing the empty house, eyes bloodshot, shirt untucked, muttering into the silence. It was supposed to be mine. All of it. He's old, he's weak, he can't. His voice broke. He smashed a bottle of cheap wine against the counter, the liquid staining the floor like spilled blood. For the first time in months, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity. Pity for the boy who once followed me to the vineyard, asking why leaves curled toward the sun, why grapes needed pruning, why patience mattered more than speed. I had answered every question, but somewhere along the way, he'd stopped listening. Carlos came by that evening, leaning on the porch rail. "He's unraveling," he said simply. "You've already won." But I shook my head. Not until the land is safe. Not until the legacy is sealed. Because revenge isn't just about breaking the enemy. It's about building something that outlasts their destruction. That night, I sat at the oak table with Margaret's paper spread before me. The trust was ready, but it needed final signatures, final filings, final proof that Sadie's vineyard would belong only to Avery and Riley when they were grown. Julian would never touch it again. I lifted my pen, steadier than it had been in years. And as I signed, the vineyard seemed to sigh around me, the house settling like a ship finally reaching shore. But before I could celebrate, headlights once again carved across the vineyard road. A knock thundered at my door. When I opened it, Julian stood there, wild-eyed, hair disheveled, voice hoarse. "You can't do this," he rasped. "You can't cut me out like I'm nothing. You did that to yourself," I said. He stared at me for a long moment, shaking, then staggered back into the night, leaving me with the sound of his footsteps fading down the road. He was broken, but I knew the final strike had yet to fall, and I was ready to deliver it with the vineyard's most potent weapon, the wine of revenge. They say wine reveals the truth of a man. But I wasn't pouring to reveal, I was pouring to finish what he started. The bottle sat on the table, heavy as judgment, a vintage from Sadie's last harvest, the same one I had used to spring my trap at the dinner. One bottle left, hidden deep in the cellar, like a relic. Inside its dark glass, Leo and I had sealed the truth. The recordings, the documents, every whisper of Julian's betrayal etched into a digital archive. A vineyard's memory, bottled for eternity. I called Julian one final time. My voice was steady, my heart calm as stone. "Come tonight," I said. "No lawyers, no games. Just father and son. Let's end this." He arrived late, shoulders hunched, eyes ringed red. No Kaylee, no Finn, no allies. Just a man carrying the ashes of everything he had burned. "You wanted reconciliation," he muttered as he stepped into the dining room. "But all you've given me is humiliation." Humiliation is earned, I replied. Sit. He dropped into the chair opposite me, fists clenched, jaw twitching. I poured the wine, its deep red catching the candlelight like blood remembered. The room smelled of oak and smoke, of years gone by. I slid the glass toward him, to Sadie, to the land. Julian didn't lift it. You think this makes you noble? That bottle doesn't erase what you've done. What I've done, I said quietly, is protect what your mother built, what you should have protected. He shoved the glass away. This vineyard is a prison, Dad. You chose grapes and dirt over your own son. No, I said, I chose honesty. You chose greed. I tapped the base of the bottle. The projector in the corner hummed alive, casting its light across the wall once more. But this time, it wasn't just snippets of Finn with fire or Kaylee's careless laughter. It was everything. Every conversation, every threat, every forged document. Julian's voice filled the room, damning him beyond denial. By fall, we'll have him out. This is our chance. The montage rolled on, Kaylee bargaining with inspectors, Finn pouring gasoline, Julian laughing at my supposed weakness. Every betrayal stitched together, like a tapestry of rot. Julian rose to his feet, trembling. "Turn it off," he shouted. His voice cracked, desperation spilling into the open air. But I didn't move. I only watched as his world collapsed under the weight of his own words. And then something broke. His eyes filled with tears, rage collapsing into raw emptiness. He smashed his fist onto the table, sending the glass toppling, wine staining the wood like old blood. "You've destroyed me," he whispered. "No," I said, "you destroyed yourself. I just gave you a mirror." He staggered back from the table, chest heaving, the flicker of the projector painting his face in pale light. And in that moment, I knew the war was over. The land was safe. Sadie's legacy was sealed. But the vineyard still had one more harvest to bring in, the harvest of revenge fully ripened. Julian turned and stumbled out into the night, leaving the bottle half drained, the proof still glowing on the wall behind him. And I sat alone, hearing the vineyard breathe around me, whispering that the end was near. The final reckoning waited, and it would come in the silence after rage. The collapse of Julian. They say the loudest collapse is silence, the moment when even rage gives up its voice. After the dinner, the house felt cavernous, like every wall echoed with ghosts. The projector had burned Julian's guilt onto stone, and now the silence left in its wake was heavier than the truth itself. I thought he might return, fists raised, or storm the courts again. But instead, days passed, and the vineyard whispered only peace. Until the neighbors began to talk. They'd seen Julian wandering town like a man unstitched, suit wrinkled, hair unkempt, muttering to himself in the aisles of the market. One said he screamed at a clerk when his car was declined. Another saw him hurling stones into the river, shouting names no one could hear. Leo brought me a file one evening. "I pulled the last recordings," he said. "You should see this." On the screen, Julian's house was a wreck. Curtains ripped, furniture overturned, bottles littering the floor. He staggered room to room, cursing shadows. Then he sank to his knees and wept into his hands. I watched in silence. Once, he was a boy who built Lego castles beside my drafting table, asking me if real architects ever got to live inside their own drawings. I told him yes, if they built carefully. But somewhere, he stopped caring about care. Now his castle lay in ruins. Kaylee was gone. Finn had vanished like smoke. And Julian was left with only himself. And that was his cruelest punishment. Carlos stopped by with bread and strong coffee. He shook his head. The whole valley's seen the footage. He can't walk into a diner without whispers. He's done. "Not yet," I said quietly. "The vineyard's safe, but justice isn't finished. The trust must be sealed. For Avery, for Riley, for Sadie." So I called Margaret. We met at the courthouse, where autumn sunlight slanted through tall windows, painting the floors gold. She laid the final documents before me. "This will make it irreversible," she said. "When you sign, the land belongs to the grandchildren. No challenge can undo it, not even Julian's." My pen touched paper, and I thought of Sadie's letter. "Your spine is still straight. Line by line, stroke by stroke, I sealed the promise. When it was done, Margaret pressed her stamp like a blessing. "Congratulations," she said softly. "It's finished." But for me, nothing finished until I closed the circle. That night, I returned to the vineyard. The rose glowed silver under the moon, leaves trembling in the cool wind. I carried a lantern and walked the soil, whispering to the vines like old friends. "You're safe now," I told them. "You'll grow for Avery, for Riley. You'll outlast me, and that's all I ever wanted." Then I looked back at the house, its windows glowing faintly. Inside, I imagined Julian, alone, pacing, his voice cracking in the empty air. The public had seen him exposed. The valley had judged him guilty. His allies had left. And tomorrow, he would come to the final table. Because I would invite him one last time. Not as a son, but as a witness to his own end. The vineyard's revenge had ripened, and it was time for harvest. The revenge wine. They say revenge is best served cold. But I served it in crystal glasses, rich and red, the way Sadie would want her last vintage remembered. I called Julian again, though his voicemail almost swallowed me. When he finally picked up, his words slurred with exhaustion. "Why do you keep dragging this out?" he muttered. "Because it isn't finished," I said. "Come tonight. One last glass. For your mother." Silence stretched, then a broken laugh. "Fine. One last glass." The dining room glowed with candlelight when he arrived, darker shadows pushing in from every corner. I set the bottle, the true bottle, at the center of the oak table. The glass was thick, its deep red liquid shimmering like a secret. He sat down heavily, eyes hollow, hands trembling as though the air itself weighed too much. "This was Sadie's?" he asked. "The last she touched," I said, "and the one I saved for this." I poured. The wine caught fire in the light, its scent filling the room with smoke and oak and memory. Julian lifted his glass with a bitter smile. "To ghosts," he said and drank. I didn't sip. I only tapped the bottom of the bottle, releasing the code hidden beneath the glass. The projector whirred, light scattering across the far wall. At first, Julian didn't notice. But then his own voice filled the room, clear, undeniable. "By fall, we'll have him out. This is our chance." Julian's glass paused halfway down. His eyes widened as the recordings rolled on. Finn pouring gasoline, Kaylee bartering with inspectors, Julian himself laughing at my supposed weakness. Every betrayal, every scheme, painted in sound and vision larger than life. "No," he whispered. "Turn it off." I didn't move. The vineyard story played on. Kaylee's voice echoed next, her betrayal plain for all to hear. And then the footage of Finn, flames licking the vineyard, sealed with Julian's own signature on forged documents. Julian staggered to his feet, nearly knocking over his chair. "Stop it. You're destroying me." "No," I said calmly. "You destroyed yourself. I'm just showing you the harvest of your choices." He clutched his head, pacing, muttering. "She left me. Finn left me. Now this." His voice cracked into a scream. He hurled his glass at the wall, shards scattering like sharp confessions across the floor. I stayed seated, steady like the vines that bend but never break. Julian's breath came in ragged bursts. He looked at me, not as a son looks a father, but as a man stares at the architect of his ruin. "Why couldn't you just let go?" he asked, voice raw. "Because this house, this land, this vineyard, they are Sadie. They are Avery and Riley. They are everything you should have defended, not destroyed." His knees buckled, and he collapsed into the chair, shoulders shaking, face buried in his hands. The projector flickered off, leaving only candlelight and silence. Julian sat there broken, shattered by the very truth he had tried to bury. And in that silence, I knew the vineyard had spoken its final word. But the end wasn't just about him. The end had to be about me, about what I chose when revenge was complete. Tomorrow, the vineyard's legacy would be sealed, and I would step away from the battlefield forever. For tonight, I let him sit in the ruins of himself, and I whispered the name of what had finally come to pass. The breakdown of Julian. They say ruin is quiet, but I learned it has a sound, the shatter of glass, the rasp of breath, the hollow echo of a man realizing no one is left to listen. Julian didn't storm out that night. He stayed slumped in the chair long after the projector went dark, staring at the stains of spilled wine on the oak table. His lips moved, but no words came, only the guttural whimper of a man choking on his own silence. When he finally left, the door slammed too softly to mean defiance. It sounded like surrender. Days passed. The valley carried whispers. People saw him wandering the streets, hair unkempt, shoes scuffed, muttering at shadows. Someone said he shouted at a stop sign for blocking his way. Others swore they heard him crying outside Kaylee's closed studio, pounding the locked door until neighbors chased him off. I didn't seek him out. I didn't need to. Leo's cameras caught enough. Julian alone in his kitchen, shirt stained, eyes wild, pacing between the counter and the sink. He'd pick up a bottle, slam it down, smash a plate against the wall. The house looked less like a home and more like the inside of his mind, fractured, unlivable. Once he shouted into the empty room, "It was mine! All of it! He stole it!" His voice cracked, and he hurled a chair into the window, glass raining onto the porch. Then silence again. Watching him unravel, I didn't feel triumph. I felt the weight of grief for the boy he once was, who had followed me through half-built houses, asking why beams needed bracing and why patience mattered more than speed. That boy was gone, buried under greed. Carlos stopped by with a basket of bread. "Your son's a ghost now," he said. "He's not fighting you anymore. He's fighting himself." "Then he's already lost," I replied. But I knew my work wasn't finished. Revenge isn't just about watching the enemy crumble. It's about closing the circle, leaving nothing unfinished, nothing for them to claw back. So I met Margaret again at the courthouse. We sat under high windows where sunlight spilled like truth. She placed the final trust documents before me. "This will finalize everything," she said. "The vineyard, the house, the land. It will all bypass Julian entirely. Avery and Riley will inherit at 25. No loopholes. No challenges." I signed, my hand steady as steel. Ink flowed onto paper, binding the vineyard's future. When it was done, Margaret looked at me with something almost like reverence. "You've won," she said simply. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like completion, like setting the last stone in a cathedral or corking the final bottle of a vintage. That evening, I walked the rows once more. The vines whispered in the wind, their leaves trembling like Sadie's hands used to when she held a new shoot between her fingers. I thought her words in that letter. "Your spine is still straight." "Yes, love," I whispered to the vines. And now it's finished. Behind me, Julian's house sat in darkness. No lights, no voices, only a hollow shell. The man who wanted everything now had nothing. Not land, not wife, not brother-in-law, not dignity. But I still had one last choice to make. What came after revenge? And that choice would carry me to the lake, to the mountains, to a peace I hadn't tasted since Sadie breathed her last. The vineyard was safe. The legacy sealed. My spine still straight. And so I prepared for the last chapter of my life, the one that would carry not vengeance, but freedom. The final image. They thought they could bury me. But roots don't die when you cover them. They grow deeper. And tonight, I walk away knowing the vineyard will outlive us all. The courthouse steps felt colder than stone should, though the sun was bright overhead. Margaret handed me the final stamped copy of the trust, the seal pressed deep into the paper. The land, the house, every acre of vine was beyond Julian's reach forever. Avery and Riley would inherit a whole when they were old enough to understand the sacrifice. That was my victory, my revenge, my gift. Reporters pressed in, asking if I had anything to say to my son. I only said, "The land remembers who tended it and who tried to destroy it." Then I walked away. That night, Julian came one last time. He didn't knock. He stumbled into the vineyard like a ghost, his suit crumpled, tie hanging like a noose he hadn't the courage to tie. His eyes were wild, his hands shaking. "You can't leave me like this," he rasped. "You've taken everything. Kaylee's gone, Finn's gone, the firm is gone. People spit when they hear my name. You've destroyed me." "No, Julian," I said, holding Sadie's letter in my hand. "You destroyed yourself." I only held up the mirror. He laughed, a bitter, broken sound, and crumpled into the dirt. He beat his fist against the earth like a child, sobbing into the soil. The vineyard he once called an asset refused to comfort him. Vines don't cradle greed. They only remember care. Neighbors gathered at the fence line, watching. No one offered him a hand. No one stepped forward. The third humiliation was complete, not by my design, but by his collapse. He was left with nothing. No land, no family, no respect. The valley itself turned its back. I walked past him, steady, my cane striking the ground like a gavel. I placed Sadie's letter on the mantel, the fire glowing beneath. Its words had carried me to this moment. Your spine is still straight. Use it. I whispered to the empty house. It's done, love. They can't touch it. They can't touch us. The next morning, I locked the door to the house for the last time. The oak table, the cellar, the vines, all will wait for Avery and Riley. I left my story in bottles and soil. Then I drove north into the mountains. My old friend's cabin by the lake welcomed me like an open palm. Water stretched calm and endless, pines bending toward the sky. I cast a fishing line, the ripples spreading wide. For the first time in years, I breathed without weight. I pulled a postcard from my pocket. On it, I had written to Avery and Riley, "The vineyard is yours now. When you are ready." I chose not to sell it because some things are worth more than money. Some things are forever. Remember this. I am still breathing, and I am smiling. The hook caught in the water, tugging lightly, and I laughed, the sound startling in its freedom. Back at the house, in the stillness of the empty vineyard, the bottle of Sadie's last vintage remained on the mantel, glowing red in the firelight. A monument, a warning, and a promise. My revenge was complete, my honor intact, my legacy safe. And as the sun set behind the mountains, I knew the vineyard would whisper my name for generations, not as a man who surrendered, but as one who stood, fought, and won. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.